Dana Chandler was living in a trailer behind her sister's house in Duncan, Oklahoma.
One team come up this way, one team come up here to the main house like this.
Whenever you are executing an arrest warrant,
She's just so unpredictable.
where the defendant is alleged to have committed a double homicide,
If she goes mobile on us, she's going to come right down 42nd Street.
that always raises everyone's anxiety level.
I think there's a real possibility that when she sees us coming in, she may be the type to not give up so easily.
We really wanted to make an arrest on a cold case murder that had been languishing for 9.5 years.
The killer made it downstairs, shot Karen Harkness multiple times, shot Mike Sisko multiple times.
My dad and his fiancée Karen were murdered on July 7th, 2002.
Whoever it was that did this hated these people. They wanted them dead, and they wanted to make sure they were dead.
I want answers. I want to know why. I want to know everything.
Malik laid eyes on her this morning, walking around the front side of the camper.
We get the search warrant signed. At that time, we're good to go.
In my experience, DAs don't go along on the arrests.
At the end of the day, like Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. You and I will leave in this car. While the law enforcement partners were doing their final debriefing, she gets in her car and leaves home.
It's her. She's on the move. Okay.
He's moving. Everyone scattered out. And there she was.
Get out of the car! Both hands out of the car! Walk back and start it! He's coming backwards.
For 10 years, I've been thinking about justice.
Stop there. Get down on your knees. Hands down.
She's gotten away with something that she did. Dana committed these murders, took 2 people's lives.
The state of Kansas has issued a warrant for your arrest for 2 homicides, okay? Okay.
I needed justice for my dad and for Karen.
State of Kansas versus Dana Chandler.
I was scared to death because I knew that she had killed Mike and Karen, and I did not know that we'd be able to prove it. We didn't have fingerprints, we didn't have DNA, and we didn't have it in terms of forensic science.
I know she's dangerous. I have no doubt in my mind.
She would not hesitate to get revenge on me. I know that. I love a part of her. There's a good person in there somewhere. She has a very complicated role in my life because she is my mom. And she's my dad's killer. She's being held accountable for what she's done, and I hate that that's the truth, but it is. Your mom did kill your dad. That's the fact.
State of Kansas versus Dana Chandler.
And the fact is, it's taken 10 years to get Haley Sisko's mother, Dana Chandler, into a Topeka courtroom to face trial for murdering Haley's father, Mike Sisko, and his fiancée, Karen Harkness. Haley was just 17, and her brother Dustin was 15 at the time of the murders.
I know Mom did it.
And you've known that for 10 years?
Yeah.
Lord knows I don't want it to be her. If it wasn't, I would be on cloud 9.
The question is, will prosecutors be able to convince the jury that Dana Chandler is a murderess?
Convict her because she killed Mike Sisko, she killed Karen Harkness, and she robbed her own children of their father and his fiancée.
But here's the problem with the case. There's absolutely no physical evidence. No DNA, no fingerprints. Also, no witnesses. Almost no way at all to place Dana Chandler at the crime scene.
Hi, Dana. Harold Dow, CBS News.
We first reported on this story back in 2009 with our late colleague, Harold Dow. It was a cold case then.
Did you know anything about the death of Michael and Karen?
I have no idea what happened to Mike and Karen.
There's some people out here who think that you had something to do with it.
I know that.
48 Hours was first to publicly name Dana Chandler as the prime suspect. And she sure seemed like the perfect suspect. Dana and Mike were married for 16 years, but went through a long and especially ugly divorce. She lost custody of Haley and Dustin when the court ruled that Mike was the more stable parent.
My dad was really in my life growing up. He was really my hero.
Mike was 47. He sold welding equipment.
Smile real big, Mike. Let's see your teeth. He had a wonderful sense of humor. He kept his humor no matter how he felt inside.
Carol Cisco is his mother.
I see the pain in my grandchildren's hearts with him gone. And we just miss him so much.
Mike had been dating Karen Harkness for 4 years. She was 53, also divorced, and a mother of 2 grown children.
They were extremely happy. You could just see that, you know. Everything they did was for each other.
Harold Worswick is Karen's father, and on July 7, 2002, he and his wife, along with Carol, were meeting the couple at Karen's house, expecting an announcement that she and Mike were finally engaged.
And I rang the doorbell and knocked on the glass and couldn't raise anybody. I thought, this is strange.
They went around back and found the sliding glass door open. Inside, there was no sign of either Mike or Karen at first. And then Harold Worswick went downstairs to the couple's bedroom.
Just as I got to the foot of the stairs, I could see Karen. And I said, oh, Christ. I knew she was dead. Then I found Mike on the outside of the bed.
Mike and Karen had been shot 11 times.
The number of shots was the particularly important thing there, I felt, that it was overkill.
Lead detective Richard Voley.
It told me that there was some emotion involved in it.
Police were able to quickly rule out robbery as a motive because they found cash, along with Mike's Rolex and Karen's jewelry, untouched.
There was no profit motive in this. This was pure revenge.
So investigators started looking for someone with a grudge against one or both of the victims.
We began looking at the victims' families. They were interviewed and they cooperated fully in the investigation.
So who did that leave you with?
That left us with Dana Chandler.
She is truly evil.
Mike's sister Kathy and her husband Mark Boots have a lot of experience with Chandler. They say Dana stalked Mike.
I think she became obsessed with the fact that Mike was moving on with his life and she was not seeing the fulfillment in her own life for whatever reason.
Sometimes the stalking was just annoying, and sometimes it was more. Kathy still remembers one night years ago when she was staying with Mike during the divorce.
The kids were upstairs in their room, and we heard a noise in there. She was in the middle of the night, jumping on a trampoline in the backyard of Mike's home.
Was she saying anything while she was jumping up and down the trampoline?
Just laughing.
Just laughing.
Yeah, just laughing.
And then when Karen entered the picture, that's when things really started, I think, escalating.
Dana's surprise appearances became so frequent that Mike started keeping track in this journal. July 28th, Dana stalking neighborhood at 8:30. Caught her. She left. November 12th, Dana came in house while I was at Karen's from 7 to 11. Went through stuff. Caught her walking out back door when I came in. Called police.
All this harassment and stalking had come to the point that Mike told me that he and Karen now feared for their lives.
The last time she showed up was 1 month before the murders. Mike found Dana inside his house, drinking a cup of his coffee.
She said, the kids are getting older, they're having different issues with themselves now, they need both parents. I think I should move back in and we should parent together.
And he said,
"Are you effing crazy? I'm marrying Karen."
Was that the first time he told her that he was marrying Karen?
We think it might have been.
And Mike's family believes that final rejection pushed Dana over the edge. But at the time, she was living 8 hours away in Denver, and Topeka police still had no evidence linking her to the murders. And then Detective Voley talked to Dana. It wasn't what she told him, it's what she didn't tell him.
She didn't tell me about the gas cans because she didn't want me to know about the gas cans. So my assumption is that there's something about the gas cans that is important.
I'm just like, who else could have done this? It's got to be somebody else. You know, I just can't believe it was my mom. My mom?
But Haley's mother, Dana Chandler, was now the main suspect, and Detective Richard Voley interrogated her about where she was around the time of the murders.
She said she'd been at home Saturday morning, that's July 6th, and then made a couple of errand stops.
Chandler said she had bought cigarettes, snacks, a coffee thermos, and a replacement cigarette lighter at various stores around Denver before filling up her car with gas and returning home around 3 p.m.
She said she'd stayed at her apartment by herself, didn't have any visitors, and the next day got up and went for a drive in the mountains at 10 o'clock in the morning.
But there was no trace of her, no way to prove where she was after her errands until hours after the killings.
What we found was there was a 27-hour window where her phone wasn't used and there were no credit card transactions.
There's Dana.
That is a key point for Chandler's one-time brother-in-law, Mark Boots.
And I knew that was highly unusual with her. She used her cell phone almost continuously.
And police became even more interested in Dana Chandler's movements when they learned she neglected to mention, in her detailed statement to them, one purchase detectives thought was very curious.
She bought 2 5-gallon gas cans as well.
What'd you make of that?
That was very strange. And also very strange that she neglected to tell me that she'd bought 2 5-gallon gas cans.
Voley now suspected Chandler had bought all those supplies for a road trip and that she had spent Saturday night driving from Denver to Topeka 542 miles to murder Mike and Karen.
I thought that she had used the gas cans to avoid making a stop in Kansas and not have to use a gas station at all.
But if Chandler made the drive on the night of the murders, Detective Voley needed to find someone who saw her.
So I sent 2 detectives driving I-70 west towards Denver, looking for any convenience stores that had video surveillance.
And it was here at this truck stop in Waukene, Kansas, that police got their first big break. They didn't have surveillance cameras here, but they did have one eagle-eyed clerk named Patty Williams. And she told police she was 70% certain that Dana Chandler stopped here the night of the murders to use the restroom and look at some self-help books, including this one, Overcoming Hurts and Anger.
That lady described Dana Chandler down to the crease in the corner of her mouth on the right side that she called a scar.
Bullseye.
Bullseye.
Voley thought he had enough to arrest Chandler and went to the DA at the time, Bob Hecht.
And he said, but you can't put her in Kansas. And I said, we have Patty Williams that puts her in Kansas. And he said, but that's only a 70% ID. I said, that's true. And that was essentially the end of the story.
A reluctant DA meant the Cisco Harkness murder case went cold. So the Cisco family started their own investigation, looking for evidence the police might have missed.
I put her picture up everywhere. Have you seen this person?
Kathy Boots and her mother Carol, who was then 65 years old, hit the road, searching for clues in dumpsters and in rest stop bathrooms.
But we thought, you know, maybe she threw the gun somewhere. So I would stand on a toilet and try and push a tile up. Mom and I would take, this is awful, manholes up and, you know, pry them up and try and see down in there. And I just kept thinking there's something we're missing.
So you took this on yourself?
Yes.
Not surprisingly, Kathy and Carol found nothing. But then Haley joined in the investigation. For years, she secretly tape recorded her own mother, hoping Dana would reveal something Haley could use against her one day.
I think that the only way I can really move on with a relationship with you is if you can just tell me yourself that you did it.
Well, number one, I didn't do it, and number two, I don't know what happened, Haley.
Was that hard to do?
I don't want to believe it's my mom. That's the last person. And every time I talked to her, it was more and more apparent that she was hiding something, that she was hiding the truth. And you had plenty of time to get to Kansas by Saturday night at midnight.
Haley, I was not in Kansas at Saturday night at midnight. I was not in Kansas at all that weekend.
I just obviously wish I could have got her to confess.
But after years of investigation, both amateur and professional, there was finally a turning point. It came in a local pizza parlor called Glory Days. What happened in this pizza parlor?
This is where I met Chad Taylor, as he was candidate Taylor then for DA.
He was running for DA?
Running for DA. I'd never met the man before, and then I started pitching some of the things that I was interested in this case in particular.
Dana Chandler.
Yes.
He said, you know, when you win the DA's race, I want to sit down and talk with you about this case because I think it's a fileable case. I think it's a winnable case. It just, we need somebody to work it. And that's kind of how it started from there.
Chad Taylor won that election and took office in 2009. The murders became a priority again, and he took a hard look at the circumstantial case with Chief Deputy DA Jackie Spradling.
A strong circumstantial case is never as good as a strong scientific case.
They worked it for 2 years and finally decided, even though the case had problems, it was time to move.
This gets no better. This case is never going to get better than it is. It's right now today.
10 years after the murders and 8 months after Dana Chandler's dramatic arrest, the case was finally going to trial. Were you ready?
I've been ready since years, many, many years.
She'd better be ready for anything because Haley will have to help prosecutors paint the ugliest possible portrait of her mother.
A woman's a nut job.
If she's a bad mother, if she's a crazy person, doesn't necessarily make her a killer.
This hag killed 2 people, and the reason we know that is because everything she said she was doing instead of the killing was a lie.
10 years, no forensics. Is it worth pursuing this totally circumstantial case? Chat now on Facebook and Twitter.
Some of them are right at them, and some of them is like a foot and a half, some like 3.5 feet.
District Attorney Chad Taylor had Dana Chandler in his crosshairs.
The defendant in this case is charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree.
In March 2012, Chandler's trial was about to begin, and putting her behind bars would not be easy.
It was pretty clearly evident to, I think, everyone who did this. The issue was, could it be proven?
But the case is strong enough for the families of Karen Harkness and Mike Sisko.
I would rather try and see what happens at trial than to never know.
May I please the court?
In opening statements, Deputy DA Jackie Spradling gets right down to business.
I could kill him. I thought about killing him. These are the words of this defendant about her ex-husband, Mike Sisko.
The defense case is simple and pretty obvious.
That there is no evidence that places Dana Chandler in or near the Harkness residence on July 6 or 7, 2002.
Mark Bennett, Chandler's lawyer, argues the reason there's no forensic evidence linking Chandler to the crime is she didn't do it, period. End of story.
I believed her. I still believe her.
But the prosecution hopes to convict Dana Chandler largely with her own words. Where was she the night of the murders? For 27 hours, she was unaccounted for.
Her lack of an alibi is huge.
As it turns out, Chandler told two different stories, one to police and one to a friend, and both versions seemed fishy. Dana first told Detective Voley that story about spending the night of the murders at home, and the next day driving through Rocky Mountain National Park. But there's a problem with that story.
Law enforcement watched countless hours of video from the cameras going into and out of Rocky Mountain State Park. She wasn't there.
Shortly after that statement to police, Dana gave a friend, Jeff Bailey, a different story.
She told me that the story she was giving me was the truth, and the story that she'd given to the law enforcement was not the truth.
Chandler told Bailey she had gone camping and had slept in her car on the night of the murders. And here's the problem with that story. Along the route Dana said she took back in 2002, there were historic fires blackening Colorado. But she told Bailey she saw nothing.
In your view, what did this landscape look like when she was driving through there?
Black, charred, and just nubs that used to be the trees. It's simply unimaginable to drive through acres of burnt forest and not know that the thing had been burned up.
Wherever Dana was for those 27 hours, the authorities know the Sunday after the murders, she ended up in Loveland, Colorado, 57 miles north of Denver. She bought gas and went to Walmart for some new clothes.
Why do you think she bought clothes in Loveland?
Because she threw away the clothes that she used when she was doing the killing.
And prosecutors have an interesting theory to explain how she got to Loveland.
The escape for her is not backtracking the entire route, but to get out of Kansas. Go directly up to Nebraska and avoid the Kansas authorities.
Spradling believes Chandler used those two gas cans to get her out of Kansas after the murders without a trace.
It would have taken that extra 10 gallons to get her out of Kansas.
Problem is, prosecutors have absolutely no evidence that she was ever in Nebraska.
You can't prove that she did any of this.
I can't prove that she went into Nebraska. You're absolutely right. But also don't forget Patty Williams, who was the woman in Waukene that did see the defendant in her car.
But Patty Williams, the clerk at this truck stop, who was 70% sure that she had seen Dana the night of the murders, would not be able to say anything to help prosecutors at trial. In 2006, she died.
That was going to be a problem. That was our best evidence that she was in the state.
So now prosecutors had no eyewitness and no forensic evidence. All they had was a defendant with a weak alibi and a very strong motive.
The defendant was pushed over the edge, realizing that she would never get Mike back and that he was going to marry Karen.
One by one, prosecution witnesses describe what they call Dana's stalking.
I heard a sound, and I looked out. And
Mike's sister, Kathy Boots.
And she was on the trampoline, jumping. Dana.
And his brother, Tim Cisco.
2001, we had a family get-together out at Karen and Mike's property, and I actually saw Dana drive by. At the time, she was living in Colorado.
And other witnesses say Mike and Karen lived in terror before they were murdered.
Usually it was incessant phone calls, harassment, all hours of the night. She called as often as you can dial the phone. Just hit repeat or redial over and over, sometimes a minute apart, sometimes 3 minutes apart.
Mark Bennett says Dana was just being a good mother.
I think there were many calls that she made to talk to the children.
But Haley says her mother never asked about her or her brother Dustin.
Every time she would call, she would ask me, what's your dad doing? Where is he at? What's he doing? She would not let me off the phone.
And there's more evidence that Dana Chandler was not just a stalker. She was becoming dangerous.
When I saw the look on Mike's face, he was distraught.
For the last 10 years, Mark Boots has been haunted by the last conversation he had with Mike on a fishing trip. It was just the week before the murders.
He turned to me and said, "Mark, you're going to wake up and find me dead, and I want you to know who did it. Dana Chandler."
Will you tell us your name, please?
Mark Boots.
Mark thinks if he can tell that to the jurors, it could be powerful enough to assure a conviction.
Was he talking to you about some recent events that were disturbing?
Yes.
Will you tell us what they were, please?
Judge, can we approach, please?
Mark Bennett objects. He says that statement is hearsay, and the judge agrees. So the jury will not be allowed to hear that Mike predicted his own death at the hands of his ex-wife.
I think it's a travesty that they can't hear that. Mike told it directly to me, and I believe I should be able to tell the jury. Mike sure can't.
But there are still 2 more witnesses with devastating first-hand testimony.
Do you know the defendant in this case, Dana Chandler?
Yeah, she's my mom.
Dana's own children, who will face their mother in court.
I'm Haley Cisco. I know it's going to be very hard. It hurts a lot to face what's really happening.
But you can do this?
I can do this.
How can you get 48 hours anytime, any place? Want a clue? Your iPad. Reality drama, exclusive extras. To miss it would be a crime.
I've built so much anger toward her. She doesn't even realize what she's put me and my brother through.
It's hard to know if Haley and Dustin Cisco are looking forward to this moment or dreading it. 10 years after their father and Karen Harkness were murdered, Dustin and Haley are about to become star witnesses against their mother.
I want to know why. Why'd you do it?
Dustin is up first. The prosecutors want him to tell the jury that his mother used visitations with her children to stalk their father.
She took me and my sister with her to go spy on my dad. And so we were in the car, and she told us, we're just going to be her little helpers. My mom and my sister got out of the car to go peek into a window.
And how old were you at the time, roughly?
12, maybe. And at the time, I didn't know it was strange. I thought it was just a game, Yes, I ended up going on the trip.
Dustin appears unemotional through his testimony until Jackie Spradling asks him how he found out his father had been murdered. Dustin was away on a canoe trip.
My grandma and my sister showed up, and I told them that my dad was going to pick me up in the morning.
Do you want a break, Dustin? It'll be okay. Do you want one?
And they told me that my grandma sat me down and told me that he was murdered.
It's hard to watch Dustin relive that moment.
I'm almost done.
Even for the prosecutor, who has seen more than her share of tragedy.
Did your dad have trouble with anybody but the defendant?
No.
Did Karen have trouble with anybody but the defendant?
No.
That's all I have.
And then it was Haley's turn.
Right when I walk through that door, the whole world is about my dad's been killed and my mom shot him. She was really just obsessed.
But Haley is not just another witness. Remember, for years, she helped investigators by secretly recording her mother. And prosecutors are about to play those tapes in court.
You want to know what happened to your dad? I don't blame you. I want to know what happened to your dad so that I can get off the hook, because I'm sick of being on the hook for it.
It was during that recording that Dana, who is a recovering alcoholic, for the first time tried to explain why she bought those gas cans.
I ran into a girl that had run out of gas at an AA meeting, and so I went and got want for her. She asked me for money, and we don't give people money at AA.
But over the years, Dana has never named that woman.
What was her name? Can get a hold of her? I mean, if she could say that, that would just be awesome. Kaylee, I have no idea.
You don't know? What? Just as I thought. It really wasn't a surprise. The G, the U, the I, the LTY, it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger every conversation.
Like her brother, Haley could only remain composed for so long as she testified against her mother.
We cut eyes a few times, and just real hatred, just hatred. She's just burning me at a stake, pretty much.
Then, during a break in the testimony, her mother seemed to mouth silently across the courtroom, "I still love you. It's okay. I'll always love you." And Haley broke down. And a few moments later, she also seemed to mouth, "You're my baby girl."
I'd like to think it was coming out of love, but right after that, after about 10 minutes, it was right back to the glaring.
But Mark Bennett insists his client loves her children, even now.
She doesn't bear them any ill will. She loves them, and this isn't going to change that.
And Bennett presents evidence that he says raises more than just reasonable doubt.
I've been dispatched there for a past burglary.
He calls a series of officers who investigated break-ins not far from Karen's home.
It would be to the east, half a mile.
Bennett says had striking similarities to this case, like the sliding glass door that was found open at the crime scene.
The sliding glass door had been found open?
Correct.
In at least one of those burglaries, blank checks were stolen. And after the murders, Bennett says two men, Walt Rogers and Terry Tigner, were in possession of one of Mike's checks.
They got two people out there, Terry Tigner and Walt Rogers, that are bad, bad people. They've got long rap sheets and a lot of convictions.
Prosecutors dispute that theory. The police determined the check was not taken from the murder scene. It was forged, but made out for just $30, and whoever committed the murders left behind that watch and the jewelry and the cash. Still, Bennett argues the police ignored other suspects.
I think they had made up their mind who the likely suspect was.
And they did that, Bennett argues, even though there was nothing concrete linking Dana Chandler to the murder.
You saw me swear the testimony.
He used lead detective Richard Voley to make that point.
Was there any physical evidence, hairs, fibers, receipts, anything that placed her in Topeka, Kansas, or the state of Kansas?
There was no hair or fibers that linked her to the state of Kansas.
It turned out when this case was reopened, there was one tiny piece of what could be physical evidence. It was a human hair on one of the shell casings.
Physical evidence carries greater weight than circumstantial evidence. They had physical evidence.
The hair did not match Dana or either of the victims, and authorities did not test it any further.
Can you tell this jury that those hairs and that DNA that was unidentified did not match Terry Tigner's?
No.
Same thing true of Mr. Rogers?
It was not checked.
Bennett argues the hair could belong to the real killer.
They should have explored all the potential physical evidence that they had.
And now the Sisko family is afraid the jurors will see holes in this case, that they'll find reasonable doubt that Dana Chandler will be set free.
If justice is not served and she's released, it's going to be a life-changing event for all of our family. We're going to have to relook at how we're going to live our lives because we truly are afraid of Dana Chandler.
After all the tears and all the testimony, the toughest part of this trial is about to begin. Closing arguments and the wait for a verdict.
I don't know what other favors they do for each other.
Once again, Deputy DA Jackie Spradling relies on evidence gathered by Haley Sisko. Listen to the instant message Dana sent to Haley about Haley's father.
I cannot continue to have that bastard in my life anymore.
In an email to her then 14-year-old daughter, Dana slams Karen Harkness, too.
I know she's a tramp, and I pray to God you never go there. Demonstrates to you the level that the defendant hated Mike Sisko. Demonstrates to you the level the defendant hated Karen Harkness.
Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence?
It's a familiar refrain and the crux of Mark Bennett's case.
All this time they've been trying to put her in Kansas when this happened. And for 9.5 years they've come up dry.
Except for Patty Williams, that truck stop clerk who told police she was almost certain she saw Dana Chandler in Kansas the night of the murders. Even though she's dead, she still could be a major factor in this case.
Not being hers.
Shortly before the trial started, the prosecution got their hands on these jailhouse phone recordings between Chandler and her sister, Shirley.
I'll keep wanting to talk about that Patty Williams. She's dead. I know. That's huge for you. Yes, that's huge for you. Because that little piece of information could potentially put me in Kansas, but that's the only thing.
The defendant is celebrating with, right alongside Shirley, the fact that the person who could put her in Kansas is dead and cannot come and testify against her.
I am feeling, today was such a good day.
This defendant is guilty.
Finally, Spradling urges the jury to end the 10-year ordeal for the victims' families.
You're the end of this story. Come back to us and tell us the word we all want to hear. Tell us guilty.
All right. Thank you very much.
And with that, the case goes to the jury at 2:37 p.m. Despite a courtroom filled with circumstantial evidence, prosecutors are still filled with worry.
Do we have the right jury, and are they going to allow this to happen without that smoking gun or that fingerprint?
They wouldn't have to wait long for an answer. At 4 p.m., there's a verdict. The jury's been out just 83 minutes.
This could go either way. What are you feeling? It's that quick, does that mean it's going to be guilty, or does that mean they didn't buy into any of this?
The last few minutes, waiting for the jury to announce its verdict, were agonizing.
Defendant would please stand.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of the crime of murder in the...
Dana Chandler is guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. She barely has a reaction. Her children are overwhelmed. Haley has been fighting for this moment for almost 10 years. A daughter forced to pursue her own mother.
I don't feel victorious. I don't think there's any winners at all. There's justice, but that's about it. You know, my dad's not coming back, and neither is Karen, and that's the truth. That's the bottom line.
And here's the last great irony in this case. Even though Patty Williams never lived to tell the jury what she saw, the jury believed her story. And it was all because of Dana Chandler's chat with her sister Shirley.
So in the end, it was the defendant's own statements that got in what we otherwise could not have.
5 months after the jury's verdict, Haley and Dustin will have to see their mother at least one more time at her sentencing. This time, Dana Chandler arrives in shackles, representing herself.
I absolutely deny I ever stalked Mike or Karen, and there's been no evidence presented that I did. But most importantly, I deny that I murdered Mike or Karen. I am innocent. I did not murder Mike or Karen.
6 members of Mike and Karen's families want to tell Dana what she did to them and ask the judge to give her a life sentence.
Dana, you've murdered my brother and my friend, and I will not allow you to take one more second of my time. not one more second.
But it's Haley, speaking for herself and her brother, who has the last word for the Cisco family.
We each have a deep scar in our souls from what this monster has done. But I will stand here today and tell you that we are survivors. We will live the fullest lives that we can because that's what my dad would have wanted for us. Dana could care less about us and our struggles, but my dad wants us to flourish while we're on this earth. And that's what we're gonna do for you, Dad.
I have just sentenced you to life.
Dana Chandler is given 2 life sentences, one for killing Mike Cisco, one for killing Karen Harkness. And with Dana Chandler locked away, the Ciscos are finally free.
So 5 years from now, what do you think you'll be doing?
Married and with a family and doing well.
You want to be a mom?
I do. Right bad. I want to be everything my mom wasn't.
Could prosecutors have made their case without Haley? Chat now on Facebook and Twitter. A celebrated chef.
I'd never tasted any food that was that good.
A wife, he says, left him.
He just kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
A wild confession.
Like, what?
And a desperate act.
He's running towards the cliff's edge.
He's taking his clothes off. He took off like this and went, ah! And just whoosh, went right over.
What really happened to Dawn? 48 hours, next.
On television, online, on the go, and now on iPad. CBS News.